At first, nothing dramatic happens. There's no explosion, no final argument that feels like a movie scene. There's just space, silence, distance, and in the beginning, that silence feels easy for her, almost peaceful. She tells herself this is what she wanted. No more discussions, no more emotional weight, no more feeling like someone expects something from her. She feels lighter, free. She fills her time with distractions, friends, social media, late nights, new conversations. She assumes you're doing the same thing you always did before, waiting, hoping, staying emotionally available just in case she changes her mind. That assumption gives her comfort, because as long as she believes you're still there, even quietly, she doesn't have to face the consequences of losing you. But what she doesn't realize yet is that your absence isn't passive, it isn't weak, it isn't a tactic, it's a decision. And decisions have weight. As days turn into weeks, the silence changes texture. It's no longer calming, it's unfamiliar. She checks her phone less casually and more intentionally. She notices you haven't reached out, not once. No, just checking in. No emotional message. No reaction to her stories. No breadcrumbs. At first, she rationalizes it. She tells herself you're just busy, or maybe you're trying to make a point. She expects the silence to break any moment, because in her experience, men always come back. They always crack. They always need closure, reassurance, or validation. She's used to being the emotional center of gravity. But then something unsettling happens. The silence stays. That's when your absence starts speaking louder than any argument ever could. No words, no accusations, no explanations, just consistency. And consistency is what makes it real. If you had disappeared dramatically, she could frame you as emotional, immature, or reactive. If you had sent long messages explaining your pain, she could feel powerful, needed, important. But you didn't. You removed your presence without noise, and that creates a psychological vacuum. Now her mind starts filling in the blanks. She starts replaying moments she ignored, times you were calm when she expected you to fight, times you walked away instead of begging, conversations where you didn't chase clarity, you simply observed. At the time, she may have mistaken your emotional control for indifference. Now she realizes it was strength. And that realization doesn't arrive gently. It creeps in late at night when distractions fade and thoughts get louder. She wonders why you're not trying to win her back, why you're not asking for another chance, why you're not demanding answers. The lack of reaction challenges her sense of importance. Because deep down, many people confuse being wanted with being valued, and your silence suggests something far more threatening than anger it suggests self respect. As more time passes, curiosity turns into doubt. Doubt turns into discomfort. She starts questioning the story she told herself about you. If you were as dependent as she assumed, you would have reached out by now. If you needed her to feel whole, the silence would be unbearable for you. But the reality forming in her mind is the opposite. Maybe you were stronger than she thought. Maybe you didn't need to prove anything. Maybe walking away wasn't a loss for you, it was alignment. That realization hits the ego hard. Now she starts scanning for signs. She checks if mutual friends mention you. She looks for clues online, not because she wants you back yet, but because she needs reassurance that she still matters. But your absence provides no validation, no emotional feedback loop, nothing to grab onto, and the mind hates uncertainty more than rejection. She begins to feel something unfamiliar, the loss of control. Before she could predict your reactions, she knew how to trigger you, how to pull you back in, how to reset the dynamic when she wanted attention. Now there's no access point. You didn't block her dramatically. You didn't announce boundaries. You simply stepped out of the pattern. And without realizing it, she's now the one emotionally reacting to your non reaction. That's when absence becomes louder than words, because words can be argued with. Words can be twisted, dismissed, rationalized. Silence cannot. Silence forces reflection. It removes distraction. It creates contrast between what was and what is. And contrast is where awareness is born. She remembers how stable you were, how you didn't fluctuate emotionally, how you showed up without needing constant reassurance. Those qualities didn't feel exciting in moments of emotional chaos, but now, in the quiet, they feel grounding. And once she feels that absence, she can't unfeel it. She starts to recognize that you didn't leave to punish her. You left because you were done abandoning yourself. And that realization reframes everything. It means you weren't weak. You weren't rejected. You weren't waiting. You chose peace over potential, growth over attachment, dignity over familiarity. And here's the part that hits hardest. She realizes she didn't push you away. You walked away. That shift removes her leverage because if you left on your own terms, you can stay gone on your own terms. And that's when fear quietly enters. Not panic yet, just a subtle awareness that something irreversible may have happened. She may still tell herself stories, she may still delay action, but deep inside, the seed has been planted. The understanding that the man she thought would always be there isn't coming back. Not because he's angry, not because he wants revenge, but because he finally chose himself. And nothing unsettles someone more than realizing they were not the center of another person's universe, especially when they assumed they were. Your absence doesn't scream, it doesn't demand recognition, it doesn't chase acknowledgement, it simply exists. Calm, firm, final. And over time, that quiet decision becomes impossible to ignore. At the beginning, everything feels exciting for her. There's a rush that comes with novelty, with new attention, with the idea that the world has suddenly opened up again. She tells herself she made the right choice, that she didn't lose anything, she gained freedom. New conversations light up her phone, compliments come easily, invitations appear without effort, and on the surface, it looks like abundance. It feels like confirmation. She mistakes options for value, and in that early phase, the illusion is strong enough to silence doubt because attention is immediate, loud, and addictive. She compares this new energy to the calm stability you offered and convinces herself that calm meant boring, that predictability meant stagnation. She forgets that what you gave wasn't excitement, it was grounding, leadership, presence, emotional safety. But those things don't create fireworks in moments of ego driven curiosity. They reveal their worth over time, and time hasn't done its work yet. So she leans into the options. She dates casually. She meets men who are charming in short bursts, confident in words but inconsistent in actions, men who are eager to impress but lack direction, men who want her attention but don't actually know how to lead her emotions. At first, she enjoys the contrast. No expectations, no accountability, no depth required. It feels lighter because nothing meaningful is being built, and that's exactly why it feels safe. But safety without substance doesn't last. Slowly, patterns begin to reveal themselves. Conversations that start strong but fade quickly. Promises that sound good but never materialize. Energy that's intense in the beginning and absent when it matters. She notices how often she's the one adjusting, accommodating, lowering standards just to keep things flowing. She didn't have to do that with you. With you, consistency was the baseline, not the reward. That's when comparison begins, not the surface level kind, where she compares looks or lifestyle, but the deeper kind that happens quietly. She starts measuring how she feels after spending time with these men, drained instead of grounded, anxious instead of calm, excited in the moment, but empty afterward. And slowly she realizes something uncomfortable. Attention feels good, but it doesn't feel safe. She remembers how you showed up without needing to perform, how you didn't flood her with words, but your actions were predictable, how you didn't disappear when things got real, how you didn't need constant validation to stay present. Those qualities didn't stand out when she was surrounded by emotional noise. But now, against the backdrop of inconsistency, they feel rare. Time sharpens contrast. She begins to understand that having options doesn't mean having leverage. Options are plentiful. Value is not. Anyone can offer interest. Very few can offer leadership, stability, and emotional containment. She starts noticing how many men want access to her body, her attention, her energy, but not responsibility for her emotions, not commitment, not growth. And that's when the illusion cracks, because she realizes you weren't just another option in her life. You were the standard, the reference point, the man against whom all others are now measured. And the more she compares, the more the gap becomes obvious. Others may try harder, talk more, promise more, but they don't deliver the same sense of grounded presence you brought effortlessly. She also begins to notice something else. You're not circling back. Most men, when replaced, hover. They keep a digital presence. They react, post indirectly, seek attention, or reappear when they sense distance closing in. But you didn't. And that absence makes the comparison even sharper. Because if you were replaceable, you would have been replaced by now. If what you offered was common, she wouldn't still be thinking about it. But she is. She catches herself comparing moments unconsciously. How conversations with you flowed without effort. How silence with you felt comfortable, not awkward. How disagreements didn't feel like power struggles. Those memories surface not because she wants to romanticize the past, but because the present keeps falling short. And here's where time does its real work. It strips away fantasy. The excitement of new options fades. The novelty wears off. And what remains is reality. She sees how often she has to explain herself now, how often she feels unseen, how often she's tolerated rather than cherished. With you, she didn't have to earn consistency. You embodied it. That realization isn't dramatic. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, through disappointment after disappointment. There are nights where she feels oddly lonely despite having options. There are moments where she wishes someone would simply take the lead instead of asking her what she wants all the time. She understands, too late, that what she thought she was leaving behind was actually what made her feel secure. And that's when regret becomes personal. Not regret over losing a relationship, but regret over misjudging value, over assuming that what felt steady would always be available, over confusing abundance of choice with abundance of quality, because now she sees the difference clearly, and clarity has consequences. She may still keep dating, she may still smile and act unbothered, but internally, the standard has been set, and most can't reach it. You're no longer just a memory, you're a benchmark, a reminder that real value isn't loud, flashy, or immediately gratifying. It's consistent, it's grounded, it's rare, and time more than emotion exposes that truth. At first, she doesn't notice the change. Not really. In her mind, she assumes you're frozen in place, emotionally stalled, replaying the past, waiting for something to happen. That assumption allows her to move on without guilt. Because if you're still the same man she left, then leaving didn't cost her anything. It didn't create a gap, it didn't create consequences. She tells herself that people don't really change that. You'll circle back eventually, unchanged, familiar, predictable. But growth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek witnesses. And while she's busy living inside her assumptions, something very real is happening in your life. You're no longer spending energy trying to be understood. You're no longer monitoring someone else's moods, reactions, or mixed signals. The emotional bandwidth that once went into overthinking, waiting, hoping, and adjusting is suddenly free, and that freedom has direction. You start investing it into things that actually respond to effort, your body, your work, your discipline, your purpose, not out of bitterness, not to prove a point, but because you finally stopped leaking energy into a dynamic that wasn't growing you. From the outside, this looks quiet, unimpressive, almost invisible. But internally, something fundamental shifts. You stop identifying yourself through someone else's validation. You stop needing reassurance that you matter. You stop tying your worth to whether someone chooses you. And that internal shift begins to show up everywhere. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your standards change. You're no longer trying to be liked, you're focused on being aligned. She doesn't see this at first, but then little signs start reaching her. Mutual connections mention you casually, not with concern, not with pity, with respect, with neutrality. You're doing well, you're focused, you seem different, and that word different sticks with her longer than she expects. Curiosity kicks in. She looks for confirmation. She scans for emotional traces, sad quotes, indirect messages, signs of longing. But they're not there. No dramatics, no bitterness, no performance, just absence, movement, forward momentum. And that absence feels heavier now because it's paired with growth, not stagnation. That's when the realization begins to form. Losing her didn't slow you down, it sharpened you. You start carrying yourself like someone who knows where he's going. You don't rush. You don't explain. You don't overshare. You listen more than you speak. And when you do speak, there's intention behind it. This isn't the version of you that tried to hold things together. This is the version that learned how to let go without collapsing. She feels that shift even without contact, because growth changes energy, and energy doesn't need proximity to be felt. She remembers the man you were near that end trying to be patient, trying to be calm, trying to make something work that required two people. At the time, she may have interpreted that effort as weakness, as availability, as something guaranteed. But now, seeing you detached, focused, moving forward, she realizes how wrong that interpretation was. You weren't weak, you were invested, and now you're invested elsewhere. That contrast hits hard because it forces her to confront an uncomfortable truth. She didn't unlock your best version. Losing her did. And that stings in a way words can't soften, because it means she didn't just lose you, she lost the future version of you that now exists without her. She notices how others respond to you, the respect in conversations, the way people listen when you speak, the lack of neediness in your presence. You're not chasing attention. You're not trying to impress. You're not performing masculinity. You're embodying it. And that kind of presence can't be faked. That's when regret shifts form. It's no longer about missing the relationship. It's about missing the man you've become. She understands, slowly and painfully, that the version of you she had access to no longer exists. Not because you're closed off, but because you've outgrown the dynamic that kept you small, and growth doesn't reverse itself just because someone finally recognizes it. What makes this realization so heavy is that you didn't grow out of spite. You didn't use loss as fuel for revenge. You used it as a mirror. You faced your patterns. You strengthened your boundaries. You raised your standards. You learned how to walk away without drama and how to build without applause. That's real power. And it terrifies her because it means there's no button she can press to return to the old version of you, no emotional trigger, no familiar pattern, no leverage. The man who once adjusted for her is gone. In his place is someone who adjusts his life around purpose, not people. She sees now that your silence wasn't emptiness, it was focus. Your distance wasn't avoidance, it was direction. And your growth wasn't accidental, it was intentional. The hardest part for her isn't that you're doing better, it's that you're doing better without needing her to see it, because that confirms something final. You didn't grow to get her back, you grew because you refused to abandon yourself again. And once a man reaches that point, he doesn't shrink for comfort, he doesn't slow down for familiarity, he doesn't trade progress for nostalgia. By the time she fully understands this, the power dynamic has already shifted, not in a dramatic way, not in a confrontational way, but in the quiet, irreversible way that real growth always works. You didn't win her back. You outgrew the version of yourself that needed to. There is a moment that doesn't arrive with drama. No music, no sudden realization that drops her to her knees. It comes quietly, almost inconveniently, in the middle of an ordinary day. She's doing something routine, scrolling, driving, lying in bed, and it hits her. You're not coming back. Not in the way she once imagined. Not as the man who waited, hoped, or tried to fix things. And that understanding lands heavier than anger ever could, because it carries finality. At first, her mind resists it. She tells herself people reconnect all the time. That timing was just off. That life has a way of bringing things full circle. She clings to the idea that nothing is truly over, because accepting that something is finished means accepting responsibility for letting it end. So she delays the truth. She keeps it theoretical. But deep down, something has shifted. The possibility she once treated casually now feels fragile. She starts replaying moments with a new lens, not to romanticize, but to reevaluate. Things she once dismissed as minor now appear significant. Your patience, your consistency, your restraint. She sees how often you gave without keeping score, how you stayed grounded when emotions ran high. At the time, that steadiness felt like something that would always be available. Now she realizes it was a choice you were making every day, and choices can be withdrawn. The weight of that realization grows. She considers reaching out, not impulsively, but carefully. She imagines the message, keeps it short, casual, nothing that reveals vulnerability. Just enough to reopen the door without admitting she ever closed it. But then another thought interrupts. What if the door isn't there anymore? That's the fear she can't shake. Because this isn't about pride anymore. It's about risk. Reaching out means facing the possibility that she no longer has access, that the man she once assumed would respond is now unavailable, not emotionally, but structurally. His life has moved into a shape that doesn't require her presence. And that realization changes everything. She notices how much time has passed, how many seasons have changed, how many internal shifts she's gone through without you being part of them. And for the first time, she understands that distance doesn't just separate people, it transforms them. The version of you she knew belonged to a specific moment. That moment is gone. She feels the urge to act before it's too late, but she can't pinpoint when too late became now. That ambiguity is unsettling because it means she missed the window without realizing it was closing. And once a window closes quietly, it rarely reopens the same way. She finally admits what she's been avoiding. You didn't leave to create urgency. You left because you were done negotiating your worth. And people who leave from that place don't come back for reassurance or unfinished conversations. They move forward cleanly. That's when regret stops being abstract. It becomes personal, heavy, specific. She doesn't regret losing the relationship as much as she regrets misreading the situation. She thought you'd pause your life while she figured hers out. She thought distance would soften you, make you more available later. She didn't realize distance was the thing that clarified you. She remembers how you didn't beg, didn't threaten, didn't over explain. At the time, that lack of reaction felt underwhelming. Now she sees it as strength. You trusted yourself enough to walk away without needing her agreement. And that kind of self trust doesn't dissolve with time, it deepens. She imagines reaching out and hearing something she can't control, politeness instead of warmth, calm instead of eagerness, closure instead of hope. And that possibility frightens her more than rejection ever did, because it confirms something irreversible. The emotional dynamic has flipped. She also recognizes something painful. You no longer need her to validate the loss. You've already processed it, already integrated it, already moved on in ways that don't require her participation. Her realization doesn't complete a story for you, it only completes it for her. And that's the hardest part, because it means her understanding arrives too late to change the outcome. It arrives when there's nothing left to negotiate, no leverage to use, no version of you waiting to be convinced. The power she once had, whether she realized it or not, has expired. She finally understands that timing isn't just about events, it's about readiness. And when two people are ready at different times, the one who becomes ready later often pays the price. Not because the other is cruel, but because growth doesn't rewind. She feels the loss in a new way now, not as heartbreak, but as consequence. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't ask for sympathy, the kind that sits with you long after emotions fade. It's the understanding that some connections don't end with explosions, they end with clarity. And clarity, once reached, doesn't argue. She may still think about you, wonder what could have been, but the tone of those thoughts has changed. They're no longer invitations, they're acknowledgments. Acceptance disguised as memory, and while she's processing this realization, you're somewhere else living a life that no longer revolves around whether she understands what she lost. You've reached the place where her awareness doesn't affect your direction, where her regret doesn't shift your momentum, where peace outweighs possibility. That's the final lesson. Not that she lost you, but that you left at the right time for yourself. And by the time she truly sees that, the moment for return has already passed.